Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on News Nation. So fighter jets scrambled to shoo away Russian jets, as we are also learning tonight that top generals are now being summoned to Washington by the Secretary of War. Tonight, what the president is now saying about calling Russia a paper tiger. Plus, the target was law enforcement. That from the FBI today about that shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas.
It's clear from these notes that he was targeting ICE agents and ICE personnel. The tragic irony for his evil plot here is that it was a detainee who was killed and two other detainees that were injured.
What we are also learning tonight about the man who ended up killing a detainee. Also tonight, are charges about to come for that man right there, the former FBI Director James Comey? What the president said in the Oval Office earlier today about that possibility. And the beat goes on. The president announcing a deal on TikTok, but is the app that half of the country's on, including most every kid you know, now safer? But first tonight, here from The Hill, here's how the day started, with U.S. jets scrambling. And this evening, there are a different set of questions, including this. Why are generals being summoned to Quantico? Let's start with what we know about that scene earlier this morning. The U.S. military says two Russian strategic bombers, escorted by two fighter jets, entered the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. That's a fancy name, right? But it's basically international airspace, but it is close to U.S. and Canadian territory. 4 American jets then scrambled. Now, the government says this is not seen as a threat. But it also came, as you know, just 2 days after the president vowed full support for Ukraine and called Russia a quote-unquote paper tiger. The president, though, it seemed a little bit today, walked that phrase back just a touch. Watch.
And I'm not going to ever call anybody a paper tiger, but Russia spent millions and millions of dollars in bombs, missiles, ammunition, and lives, their lives, and they've gained virtually no land. I think it's time to stop.
And with that as some of the backdrop, perhaps related or not, quite frankly, we don't know at this hour. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, is also summoning hundreds of top military leaders for a sudden meeting that The Hill is reporting is likely to take place next week. We begin tonight with our Joe Khalil, live from the White House. Joe, this is not usual to bring all of these military leaders over to Quantico, but we believe it could be hundreds next week, and we don't really know why.
No, we don't. We still don't know, Blake. To be very clear, President Trump got questions about it just within the last hour and didn't really answer what the purpose of this meeting is. What we know is it's extraordinary. You're talking about virtually all of the top commanders, generals and admirals, all coming together next week, summoned by the Secretary of War. This is what President Trump did say when asked about it in the Oval Office just a little while ago.
A lot of generals want to be here, and they want to look at they're also going to be touring equipment sites. They're going to be talking about the newest weapons, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's great when generals and top people want to come to the United States to be with our now called Secretary of War. Does everybody like the name? I do.
He and Vice President Vance, Blake, also talked to reporters about how they don't think this is that big of a deal. They said essentially to reporters they were surprised the media has been making so much of this meeting, but it is unusual. Objectively, we do not see things like this very often without a more expressed purpose. So there's a lot of questions there, Blake, that still need answers. Meantime, you pointed out the sort of shift on Russia in tone a bit. President Trump did today, however, ask the Turkish president openly in front of cameras to stop buying Russian oil because it continues to fuel Russia's war machine. And it was significant because that was the same ask he made of American allies in Europe, NATO countries, at his UN General Assembly speech earlier this week.
Our Joe Khalil, live tonight on the North Lawn. Joe K., thank you. With me now, retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. Wanted to get your perspective. Hello, sir. Let's start with how the day started, because it started, as we know, with these Russian jets basically getting close to U.S. airspace, and then U.S. fighter jets coming in and basically saying, get on out of here, we know you're here. I want to show the area that this took place in. It was off the coast of Alaska. The government says it's not a threat. Here we go. What do you make of how the day started?
Blake, it's not that abnormal for Russian bombers to violate the ADIZ, the Air Defense Identification Zone. It extends 200 miles out from the coast in general. But it is significant based on what else is going on in the world.
All the other stuff, right? With like what the president said over at the UN this week, and basically giving his full support behind Ukraine.
So that is true. And it's important to realize that both in Alaska and in Europe, any fighter pilot that takes off in those areas has rules of engagement that they know what are they supposed to do based on a variety of contingencies. And no doubt those fighters that intercepted those bombers knew what the rules were and how to engage or what to do.
All right, so about this big meeting at Quantico next week, you heard Joe Kay there. The president was asked about it. We didn't get a bunch of detail. The line from the administration is maybe too much is being made of this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you don't think so, right? This is unusual.
Blake, it's unprecedented. I have never heard all commanding generals and admirals be called into one location at one time. None of the scuttlebutt indicates what this is about. It's either about lethality and readiness or a bit of loyalty, and we'll see as the reports come out of that meeting next week.
So stuff like this you would think could potentially get out there, but we don't know. Right? Like, is there a sense in your world of what this could be?
Nope. None of the folks that I've talked to understand. There are concerns about putting all of these senior leaders at one place at one time and taking them away from their areas of responsibility so they can't command in places like the Pacific or Europe like they need to be able to do so.
All right. So take a step back. We saw the president. We heard from him today. And with everything that's been going on, General, especially with this meeting next week, again, which, you know, lots of questions. What do you think Vladimir Putin's thinking tonight?
I think my concern and our concern should be that we have lost credibility because the president made comments a month and a half ago about very severe consequences. We haven't seen them. We haven't seen the type of engagement that protects the sovereignty of NATO airspace. That credibility requires follow through, and we're now at a point where we're going to have to follow through on some of these threats.
That's your perspective from our side, but now go to theirs. What do you think Putin's thinking?
So Putin continues to believe that if he can push the limits, then he creates a new standard and he diminishes our credibility. And that's what he's been doing for the last month and a half.
Retired Brigadier General John Teichert with us tonight. If you get the info on that meeting, let us know.
I will.
Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you. All right, with us now here on the Hill, he is the Colorado Republican Congressman Gabe Evans. Sits on the Homeland Security Committee. The Congressman, hello, sir. Nice to see you. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, and thanks for being with us tonight, you're also an Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot, right? So you have a pretty unique perspective with all of this. Given the backdrop of everything, Congressman, and seeing that Russia sent jets over and our pilots had to go meet them and say hello in one form or another. I got to imagine you know these fighter pilots. You were, as I mentioned, a helicopter pilot. When you saw that news this morning, what'd you think?
Yeah, it's really what the general you just had on said. This is a game of chicken that is played fairly routinely, where you fly toward the other nation's ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, and the goal is to get them to turn on their radar, scramble their fighters, and you gauge the reception that you receive. And this is a game that's played back and forth, really for the decades in that area across the Bering Straits up there. But as you said, when you layer that around with what's going on in the rest of the world and Russian incursions into airspace in places in Eastern Europe, it definitely highlights the critical importance of military readiness and making sure that we have the lethality and the capability to be able to defend NATO airspace and American airspace.
So it's the game, as you describe it, that's been played for going on for quite some time. And as you know, as we pointed out, the government basically said today this isn't a threat, and I think it's important to highlight that. But you know the backdrop, Congressman, and so I wonder what you think Vladimir Putin's trying to do here.
Yeah, it's exactly what he's been doing for decades since he's been in control of Russia, which is test the boundaries, see how much he can get away with, and that's why things like what we just did earlier this year with the big beautiful bill, the Working Families Tax Cut Act, and the billions of dollars of investment that we put into the Department of Defense or Department of War is so critically important, because we must maintain our position as the leaders around the globe in the face of aggression like what Russia is showing. It's also critically important the administration's stance towards some of our allies in Western Europe and making sure that they up their GDP spending in defense up to the NATO required 2% at minimum. And the president has talked about potentially as high as 5% to make sure that they are also equipped to be able to deal with Russian aggression.
What do you think this meeting is over at Quantico?
Who can say? I mean, we know that the administration
isn't that amazing though? Like, you sit on the Homeland Security Committee. I just had a general on. I asked him. I got the who knows. I asked a sitting congressman on the Homeland Security Committee, and he laughed. And I don't mean that in sort of like a negative way, right? But it just goes to show sort of the intrigue behind this.
Well, I think there's a difference between intrigue and operational security, I'll make sure that there's a difference between Homeland Security and also the House Armed Service Committee, which has direct oversight over the Department of Defense. But to me, I think it highlights the operational security component of it. The fact that the purpose of this has not leaked means that we have a military and a Pentagon that is focused on the basics of protecting, again, operational security and protecting critical information. But we also know that the administration has placed an emphasis on, ending remote work and getting folks to come back to work. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see what eventually comes of this. And is it something that is as big as it's potentially being rumored, or is this more just, again, the administration doubling down on being able to get folks together in person to focus on the lethality and adaptability of the United States military?
All right, we'll leave it there. Gabe Evans, congressman from Colorado, as I mentioned, former Black Hawk helicopter pilot. Thank you, sir. Always nice to see you.
Always good to be on.
Talk soon. All right, still to come tonight. Here over the next 48 minutes or so, that man right there. You know him, James Comey. Will the Justice Department seek criminal charges against the former head of the FBI? What Pam Bondi and President Trump just said moments ago, plus new evidence coming to light in yesterday's fatal shooting at a Dallas ICE facility. The latest as we know it, Brian Enton, Tracy Walder, live for us tonight. I thank you so much for being with us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Burman. We're back on the other side of the break in 4 minutes. I'll see you then.
I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI.
President Trump, just a little while ago, talking about the former FBI Director James Comey, saying he's leaving the decision of whether to bring charges potentially against Comey to the legal side of the administration. The Justice Department reportedly racing to seek charges against Comey over testimony he gave in front of senators in 2020 before the statute of limitation runs out on that case, which is next week. Now, in that testimony, he stood behind prior testimony from 2017 about whether information was leaked to the Wall Street Journal. Here's some of what he told Congress in 2020.
What Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
In that testimony, Comey said he did not authorize a leak. Cruz there, as you saw in that clip, said someone, in his view, isn't telling the truth. Now, just this weekend, the president took to social media and seemed to push for the attorney general, Pam Bondi, to go after Comey and others. Quote, "They're guilty as hell," the president wrote, "but nothing is going to be done." He went on to say, "Justice must be served now." With me now, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration, Bill McGinley. And look who's with us as well out there in cyberspace, NewsNation legal contributor, Jesse Weber. It looks like the Big Apple there behind you, Jesse. Hello, sir. Hello, Bill. Look, we just heard from Pam Bondi in the Oval moments ago. She was asked to comment on this, and she said no comment. We haven't seen a grand jury indictment. There's a whole lot of reporting out there that maybe it could be coming. Jesse, with all of that as the backdrop that I just laid out, what say you?
I think there are serious concerns, if the reporting is true, that a detailed memo was presented by prosecutors to Lindsay Halligan, who would be essentially the attorney prosecuting this, saying there is not enough evidence to indict James Comey. Let me be clear about that. Saying not only is there not enough evidence to secure a conviction at trial, there's not enough evidence to even indict him, that there's not even enough probable cause. You know how low that standard is? They say you can indict a ham sandwich. That's a problem when you're talking about perjury, when you're talking about obstruction, to prove that a statement was false, to prove that there's criminal intent. That can be tough. So at this point, if you're seeing a prosecution, if you're seeing this move to a grand jury, and by the way, the grand jury could reject it too, it seems the argument would be, is this just politics? Which is not what it's supposed to be. The DOJ is not supposed to do the bidding of the president. They're supposed to independently look at these cases. And I think that's a legitimate concern right now if you're seeing charges and they don't have a case.
Bill, I think most folks would look at that post, the president, just a handful of days ago, basically saying, go get him. And now the reporting that maybe this could be coming. To Jesse's point, how is that not politics?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, justice is about politics. The decision whether to prosecute or not, it's always been a political decision, whether it's from street crimes or all the way up to public integrity.
Oh, come on. It's all about politics?
I think a lot of it's about politics. But let's not forget what the genesis of this is, which is Crossfire Hurricane. And if you talk to the people, the president's supporters, that was one of the biggest hoaxes that we've ever had perpetrated on the system. James Comey was a central actor in that. He was called before Congress, was required to give truthful testimony. And if he did not provide that testimony, and that testimony was material and false, he could be facing an indictment. Jesse's right. We don't know what the prosecution has. And remember, it's going to be the prosecutors who present the evidence to the grand jury. And so defense counsel does not have an opportunity to argue that. Also, with respect to this leaked memo from some of the career prosecutors, and that's the speculation there, it feels like a preemptive strike to try and muddy up the waters on this. And so I think when politics comes into play, and politics is about everything that has to do with these investigations in Washington, you can't discount some of the people who may be trying to thwart.
So, Jesse, what about to Bill's point there? I mean, look, we saw, what happened to President Trump in his election campaign, and there's folks out there who might say, you know what, maybe there is some sort of politics at play here to try to protect Comey. I'm not saying that I believe that or that's the case, but certainly there's the thinking out there.
I'll tell you what, they have until Tuesday. The statute of limitations runs out to bring it. If they don't get back an indictment from a grand jury, I think that says a lot. I think that will be a very good point. But I'll say this much, and to be clear, this can't be because the president was prosecuted that Comey should be prosecuted, that Peter Navarro was prosecuted, that he should be prosecuted. It has to be an independent basis. And let me just tell you something. The DOJ has a policy. They look at a case and they say, if it was more likely than not that they can get a conviction, that they can convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, then they move forward. If they don't have that, they shouldn't. They can't. And right now, is it just based upon these apparent statements he made? Do they have corroborating evidence? Kash Patel came out recently and said, well, we might have evidence of leaks at the top of FBI leadership. What is that evidence? If there's not enough, and this has been reviewed by career prosecutors, and they don't think there's enough, again, I go back to my initial point, that is a problem, and maybe they should second think.
Bill, does this all come down to intent?
Yes.
With Comey?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to intent, but also materiality. Was the testimony that they want to charge him on material to the proceedings before Congress? And so we're going to see what the evidence is. And as Jesse has said, it's a probable cause standard before the grand jury. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, which is what the prosecutors typically look at when deciding whether to bring the evidence to the grand jury in the first place. And so the prosecutors that get the case, if they do indict, are going to have to deliver.
Bill, Jesse, I have a sneaking suspicion one way or another, either Friday, Monday, or Tuesday, you'll be back on this show. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Bill, see you later in the show. Jesse, catch you next time. All right, still much more ahead here on The Hill. New details in the investigation into the fatal shooting at the Dallas ICE facility, what we know about the shooter, and what we know about law enforcement as the target on the other side. Brian Enton and Tracy Walder with me when The Hill returns.
He called the ICE employees people showing up to collect a dirty paycheck. He wrote that he intended to maximize lethality against ICE personnel. What he did is the very definition of terrorism.
6:30 on the dot here on the East Coast, 5:30 in Dallas, Texas tonight. That prosecutors and law enforcement officials today sharing more information on the shooter who opened fire at a Dallas ICE facility yesterday, leaving 2 detainees injured and killing 1. Investigators say the suspected shooter, 29-year-old Joshua John, acted alone and wanted to cause terror to ICE agents. The gun legally purchased in August, the suspect dying of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Officials on the scene say he may have wiped some evidence before it all happened.
He said, good luck with the digital footprint. And of course, we take this to mean that he deleted evidence from his devices.
With me now, latest of the investigation, NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton on the ground there in Dallas and in her hometown. With us once again, NewsNation national security contributor Tracy Walder. Brian, Tracy, nice to see you both. Brian, it was made very clear today from law enforcement, right, that ICE was the target here, that this was an attack on law enforcement.
Yeah, and it was a little confusing yesterday because we know that it was the detainees who ended up being struck by the bullets, one of them dead, someone from Mexico, and 2 others critically injured. But today they made clear that this guy from the roof just started shooting up the entire side of the facility, Blake. I mean, just the entire side, like half a city block, shot it all up. And that the vans were outside in the Sally Port, and it just so happens that the detainees were inside, and they were the ones who were hit. They were apparently shackled and handcuffed, and couldn't get out of the way when they heard the gunshots.
Tracy, I should add, is former FBI, former CIA, that the shooting evidence, Tracy, that the FBI says this Joshua John searched for the Charlie Kirk shooting video and searched apps that track ICE movements, expressed hatred of the federal government as well. Add all that up for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that you would put together with that. The first is obviously the premeditated nature of this. He was searching on these apps. He was looking for their location. Now, in terms of the apps themselves, those actually originally were used to organize protests in response to ICE raids. But now, essentially, it's like putting a target on the back of these ICE agents. And so we do need to be doing something about these apps. The second piece regarding Charlie Kirk, there were just a lot of similarities to me in this shooting. Obviously, writing something on the shell casings, getting to a higher point of ground. I think that he had been planning this for at least a month, in my opinion. I do think that Charlie Kirk shooting was sort of the impetus that gave him the idea to enact it in this way.
You mentioned these ICE apps. Actually, President Trump was asked about this moments ago. Let me play this, Tracy and Brian, and then get your reaction on the other side.
Does your administration have any plans to take down those apps or get them removed?
Well, I can't tell you about that, but it tells you when they want to wear masks or they want to hide a little bit, why that's so important. But these are great patriots, the ICE. And what a tough job they have. What an unbelievably tough job they have.
Tracy, I'm sure you've seen these apps. What are they in broad strokes? Can you explain them and the dangers behind it?
Yeah, well, first of all, President Trump is right. I mean, that is why they are covering their faces, because these individuals are showing up and targeting them based on what is on these apps. And as I mentioned before, these really started out, and I'm not saying it's right, but as a way to organize protests in response to ICE raids. It was tracking the movements of ICE officers. And essentially it's taken on, I guess, a life of its own. And now it's being used to violently go after them and know their whereabouts.
Brian, you're on the ground there in Texas. This is the third serious case just since July. You had 2 basically right around the July 4th weekend in which an ICE facility was targeted, a Customs and Border Protection facility separately was targeted. And one of those, in one of those cases, a federal law enforcement, or a police officer, excuse me, was grazed in the neck or had an injury to their neck. And now this. And as you're there in Dallas and been there for the last 24 hours or a little bit more than that. I wonder what folks are telling you and what you're hearing from law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are disturbed by it, obviously, Blake, especially today when we got to look into the diary of the shooter, and that he apparently fully believed that ICE agents were terrorists, and he said that they were responsible for human trafficking, and it just makes you wonder, where he got this information from. They made very clear that they believe he acted alone, but clearly he was involved in some online groups or reading something somewhere. And like Tracy said, I mean, planning it for at least a month and had such a clear shot. That's the thing from being out here. I don't know if we can show Blake really quick, but I mean, the roof is right here. Yeah, the roof is right here, Blake. And he used a ladder, got up there, and it is a clear shot to the ICE facility and the Sally port. It didn't take much planning at all to just shoot right across the street like that. It seemed like a very, very easy shot, Blake.
And that's what, like a couple 100 yards?
It's about 400 feet. Tracy was out here with me earlier, and she was like, yeah, it's not a hard shot. I mean, it's not like you have to be some kind of expert to pull that off.
Tracy, you're law enforcement for more than 2 decades. What's your world saying tonight?
I think that the situation is heightened, and I was explaining this to Brian earlier. I think law enforcement is used to having to protect themselves from people on the inside of these facilities that want to hurt us, want to escape, want to do all kinds of things. And now we really actually need to be focusing on these outside threats. It's a secondary layer of threats, and it makes it incredibly difficult for individuals in law enforcement to actually do the job that they are assigned to do. Many in law enforcement, I served under 2 different presidents, 2 different parties. We're not here, at the behest of them. We're simply there to do our job and enforce the law, and this is making it incredibly difficult.
Brian Enton on the scene. Tracy, I know, was there just yesterday with Brian, as Brian mentioned, with us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate you both, 2 of the best in the business, with us breaking this all down. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Blake.
Of course. All right, still to come tonight. Other side of the break. Russian fighter jets off the coast of the United States on the same week, really just a couple days after President Trump called Russia a paper tiger. He was asked about that today. Putin, Russia, a paper tiger, what the president said from inside the Oval. Full panel, other side.
Let me tell you a story about a kid. Shy, bullied, diagnosed with autism. But this boy had a dad who refused to let that diagnosis define his child. Well, that boy is me. I'm Leland Vittert. And this is my story, Born Lucky, Sunday at 8, 7 Central on News Nation.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. President Trump referring to the Russian military, maybe even Russia or Putin specifically, either way, he called it in a post this week, a paper tiger, prompting pushback, as you might imagine, from the Kremlin. Then we woke up to this news earlier today. Russia then sending jets like these up in the air, the U.S. scrambling to intercept them off the coast of Alaska. The president responding to his own paper tiger comment in the Oval earlier today.
I'm not going to ever call anybody a paper tiger, but Russia spent millions and millions of dollars in bombs, missiles, ammunition, and lives, their lives, and they've gained virtually no land. I think it's time to stop. I really do.
All right. Full panel here with me now. Bill McGinley back with us, former Trump White House Cabinet Secretary. Yemisi Egbawali, former Biden White House Press Office Chief of Staff. Annalise Keller, former Communications Director for Senator Cory Gardner. And out there in cyberspace with us, News Nation political contributor Chris Hahn, former senior aide to Chuck Schumer. Hahn, thanks for being with us. Stick around. Hello to you all. Thanks for being in tonight. Look, it's been an interesting, 48, 72 hours or so. The president goes to the United Nations, basically says, Ukraine, you can win this thing. He calls Russia a paper tiger. Here was the response from Dmitry Medvedev. Russia has weapons that no bomb shelter can protect against. The Americans should remember this. And then all of a sudden, Annalise, we wake up this morning to jets off the Alaskan coast. What's going on?
Yeah, there has really been a tone shift, and it started with President Trump speaking to the UN, and after that with the Truth Social, where he said that he thinks Ukraine can win all of the territory back. I mean, that is really a bit of a shift from Trump over the last year. And so I think a lot of people were looking to that and waiting to see Putin's reaction to see how he was going to respond. Now, NORAD, when they scrambled these missiles, were clear that this, or excuse me, scrambled the jets, yes.
That would be a different story.
Be clear about that. When they scrambled the jets in response to the potential incursion, they did note that this is something that happens regularly and it is not something for an immediate safety concern. But I did interpret that as a direct rebuttal to some of the tone change from President Trump.
How'd you interpret it?
I think it's basically a diplomatic shift for Trump, trying to focus the fire on Russia, to try and get them to the table, to try and get a peace deal in the Ukrainian war. I also think at the same time what they're trying to do is dial up the NATO countries to make sure that they are secure, to really maximize the pressure on Russia, to support Ukraine, to try and force Russia back to the table.
Is this Putin responding, saying, hey, we're going to do stuff like this to try to see which buttons we can push?
Some of the military experts I've seen lately since this was disclosed this morning have said it's not uncommon, but the proximity raises the question about whether they were trying to send a message.
Such dangerous posturing, I mean, to poke somebody known as a strong foreign adversary. It is great that out of this, it's clear that Trump is now on Team Ukraine. And so good to see him 100% in Zelensky's corner, especially given their tense meeting in the Oval so many months ago. But I mean, if we've learned anything from Putin, it is don't poke the bear. And Trump keeps going back and forth in this relationship.
Is it don't poke the bear, or you need to show some strength?
Can it be both?
Han?
Yeah, look, one, I agree. I'm happy he's back on Team Ukraine, or maybe on Team Ukraine for the first time. That's a good thing. But I think this needs to be handled a little bit more delicately than it's being handled right now, and I hope that it will be. I know that, look, I don't think Donald Trump wants a war with Russia. In fact, I don't think anybody believes that. But we can't be having these kind of diplomatic problems and jets scrambled off our coasts. That's not good. And Russia now being a little bolder with other NATO nations, I think that the president needs to have real talks with our allies and how to deal with this. And remember that we shouldn't be doing this alone. And if he could do that, maybe we can end this war in Ukraine, and maybe he can get some of the credit for that.
Are you trying to have it both ways, though? I wondered, basically saying, like, don't poke the bear, we need to have all these talks, while you also wanted him to be tougher. And now it seems like he's been tougher, Han, and you're taking maybe the other side of the coin.
Look, there's tough, and then there's, irresponsible. Russia is our adversary. We know this. He should be tough with them, with sanctions, protecting our allies, standing up to them and their threats. But I think just taking shots on social media that result in planes scrambling off the coast of Alaska, that's irresponsible, and we don't want to have an international incident based on some sort of, social media statement. It's what Hillary Clinton warned us about in 2016, and I don't think he wants to go down that road. I know he doesn't want to go down that road. Okay. So I'm hopeful that he'll be more careful.
Yeah, I think this is very targeted. I think it's very thoughtful. And I think that Russia, they're on their heels right now, frankly. And I think that's why Trump is choosing this moment to be forceful and to push back and to say I do think it's important that he works with European allies. And that's exactly what he's doing. And in fact, he just mentioned what's really important right now, if we're talking about what we want our European allies to do, they need to stop buying Russian oil.
And let's not forget, just a couple of weeks ago, Trump hosted all of our NATO allies at the White House to try and do some strategy about how to get a peace deal in Ukraine. He's shown a lot of strength. He's forced NATO to go from 2% of GDP to 5%. He's forcing NATO to step up to the plate and pay their fair share, but also to get ready for any inevitabilities. So I think it's not fair to say that he's poking the bear and not rallying the allies. I think he's done exactly what he should be doing.
A little bit of breaking news. Sorry to cut you off. Bill, Chris Hahn, stay with me, Yemisi, and Annalise as well. Going into my computer, post from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. No one is above the law. Today's indictment reflects this Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people. We will follow the facts in this case. John, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is an indictment on James Comey. Is that right? 2 counts, an indictment on James Comey. Bill, this is your world. This is your specialty. Guys, drop some notes in my inbox if you can, but your initial reaction.
Not unexpected, given what had happened over the past week, both with the prior Eastern District of Virginia U.S. attorney and now the new one who's in there. I think that there was a strong desire, if there were sufficient facts to get probable cause to return an indictment from a grand jury, that they do it. The statute of limitations was running out Tuesday, which I think was the sense of urgency now. We are going to see this indictment soon, right? James Comey is going to be arraigned at some point. I'm sure his defense attorneys were battling quite mightily with the Eastern District of Virginia, trying to persuade them not to present to the grand jury, and the pre-trial motions are going to fly.
How do you defend, and I want to hear from Yemisi and Han afterwards, how do you defend the post from the president's basically saying, go get James Comey, and then, what was it, like 3 or 4 days later, we have this?
Look, I think after what the president went through, after what he saw his senior staff go through, after what he saw his campaign staff went through, after the FBI armed raid on Mar-a-Lago, President Trump is really going to want to make sure that justice is done. And I know that Chris...
He's giving you an old Han, jump in.
Yeah, come on in, Han. Because I think basically what you're seeing from a Republican point of view, from a MAGA point of view, is that the Democrats have set the precedent with this, with what they did on the lawfare against President Trump and everybody.
I want to get Chris and Yemisi in. Chris?
Look, Democrats didn't storm the Capitol for their president like this man did. This is selective prosecution. It's going to get thrown out of court. He's going to make Jim Comey's life miserable for a couple of months. It's ridiculous, and it's going to lead to many members of the House of Representatives being unelected this next November. Get ready. This is what's happening, assuming we have a free and fair election, and I believe we will. But assuming we do, we are going to see many Republicans pay for this man's crimes. Okay, not crimes.
Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that?
This is selected prosecution. This is why Nixon. That text to Pam Bondi is what got Nixon removed from office. And if the Republican Party had the same courage it did back in the 1970s, they'd be standing up to Donald Trump right now, saying, "You better back off with this language of sending the U.S. attorney against your political opponents." It's un-American.
And I don't think we're going to see any of the House Republicans push back against this. I mean, when Trump made a directive to basically fire Jimmy Kimmel, the only person that really stood up was Senator Ted Cruz. He continues to make directives on social media to the people who run the DOJ and the FCC. And Jimmy Kimmel's back on air. I think James Comey will be fine.
I think, again, no one is above the law. We will see what happens here. But I completely agree. I don't think any of the Republicans in Congress are going to put up much of a fight around this. I think everyone's going to watch closely to see what's uncovered here.
So if you're just joining us, as you see on the bottom of the screen there, the Attorney General with a post moments ago that the former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted. I've been told on 2 counts. Here's the post. No one is above the law. Today's indictment reflects the Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people. We will follow the facts in this case. To Bill McGinley's point, we have yet to see the indictment or what the charges are or what is in that document. Our coverage continues here on News Nation. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Chris, Han, thank you. We return on the other side of the break.
Thank you.
Our coverage continues here on the Hill and on News Nation as there is major news in Washington tonight. The former FBI Director James Comey, according to Justice Department officials, has been indicted on 2 different counts. The Associated Press is reporting tonight he has been charged or indicted with making a false statement and obstruction of justice. It is important to note at this hour, we have yet to see any of the documentation behind this. Of course, there hasn't been an arraignment yet. We await sort of the case that the government lays out. This has come specifically from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who put out a statement, and here's the FBI Director, Kash Patel. Quote, "Today, your FBI took another step in its promise of full accountability. For far too long, previous corrupt leadership and their enablers weaponized federal law enforcement, damaging once proud institutions and severely eroding public trust. Every day, we continue to fight to earn that trust back. And under my leadership, this FBI will confront the problem head on. Nowhere," Kash Patel says, "was this politicization of law enforcement more blatant than during the Russiagate hoax, a disgraceful chapter in history we continue to investigate and expose. Everyone," he says, "especially those in positions of power, will be held to account. no matter their perch, no one is above the law. You saw there in that statement that the FBI Director Kash Patel references Russiagate. Bill McGinley, we don't know, as we only have a minute left here, and I hand it over to Elizabeth Vargas. We don't know if this is in relation to the Russia investigation or if this is in relation to an alleged leak.
That's right, and we don't know which statement it's attached to. One thing to remember is that Kash Patel came in and started going through the files of the FBI, and at one point he disclosed in a tweet that they had discovered burn bags filled with documents related to Crossfire Hurricane, which is the Russian hoax. And so we really need to see what's going to be contained in this indictment. Is it going to be a speaking indictment where it really spells it out?
What do you, in 10 seconds, Yemisi, what should we expect to hear from your side of the aisle?
We should start from a place of evidence and not vendettas, and I hope they really lean into that.
This was a story that was fluid throughout the day. The Attorney General in the Oval Office, just no more than about an hour ago or so, said no comments. But tonight, the news breaks, and our coverage continues here on News Nation. I'm Blake Burman.